Vietnam's identity has been shaped by long-running conflicts both internally and with foreign forces. As early as 111 BC, China forces has already ruled Vietnam. France in 1858, Japan's military occupation during World War II, and recently the Indochina War or American War of 1955, which led to the fall of Saigon in 1975. Although many Westerners still imagine Vietnam through the lens of war, it is in reality a country filled with captivating natural beauty and tranquil village life. It has easily recovered and is now prospering economic development. Today, we'll discover how Vietnam was able to handle the aftermaths of the wars it was involved, how they easily rose up from the torment they have suffered. Together, let's find out the reasons why Vietnam is branded a special economy.
On one hand, these challenges include miserable and backward economic situation, the result of prolonged 30-year war that requires time and resources to repair.
Since the Vietnam War ended in 1975, the Vietnamese economy has entered a period of peaceful development. The current economic conditions are more favorable than at any time since the unification of the country. But, a quarter of a century later, the Vietnamese economy still faces many challenges.
On the other, several recent historical upheavals have taken place, especially the collapse of the Soviet Union and the socialist Eastern European countries, on which Vietnam relied heavily. These events have had important consequences for the economic and social life of humankind. In general, it has left a profound imprint on the process of Vietnamese economic development in particular.
Within this historical context, the process of Vietnamese economic development after the war can be divided into two main periods. Number one is the 10-year period of the centrally planned economy from 1975 to 1985. And number two, the subsequent years of economic reform when Vietnam shifted toward a market-led economy.
In the 10-year period after the war, the centrally planned development of the Vietnamese economy fell far short of its objectives. It fell short of its expectations, of the people's expectations. Although there are some accomplishments and partial reforms that were accomplished, generally the economy has failed to develop in any meaningful way. The level of industrialization in the country remained the same despite of the intense effort of the government to promote heavy industrial development. This demonstrates that a comprehensive reform of the economy, which could have enabled it from stagnation and crisis, was long overdue in the mid-1980s.
In general, the century and Vietnam's economy was not much different from the Soviet Union's model in terms of internal mechanics, and has been poor in its level of development. But however, the historically specific characteristics of Vietnam had important consequences for the development of the country after 1975.
Well, after some initially successful experiments in following the promotion of reforms in many socialist countries, the South Congress of the Vietnamese Communist Party, well, that's in December 1986, marked a significant turning point in the transformation of the Vietnamese economy to an open, market-oriented, and globally integrated model.
The aims of these reforms fundamentally were to eliminate the state-subsidized mechanisms, to diversify the ownership of publicly owned assets, to encourage and stimulate the development of private organizations, individuals, and economic sectors. Next is to make the best use of potential resources for production and commodity exchange. Lastly, is to enact policies for the development of Vietnam for the integration into the world and economic regions.
It also aims to speed up foreign trade activities and encourage foreign direct investment to combine administrative reform with the renovation of economic policy to strengthen state management and macro regulation and to combine economic growth with general social development to stabilize politics and maintain socialist targets.
In Vietnam, an emphasis on social political stability went hand in hand with macroeconomic stabilization and control of state resources. These issues became very important factors in the creation of a favorable environment for the transformation and development of the market economy in Vietnam.
The result of 15 years of primary reform is that the Vietnamese economy has rapidly grown overall its early period of stagnation. The outstanding achievements of this transformation include its high growth rate and macro stability, the reduction of inflation, and the rapid increase of export turnover. As a mark of this new period of growth, after 1989, Vietnam became one of the big three rice exporters along with Thailand and US.
Lotus flower. This kind of flower is very special. They live near the mud but still have a pure and upright, pleasant smell just like the Vietnamese people. Although faced with many difficulties, they still keep it pure and upright inside their soul.
The bamboo trees grow vertically and are like Vietnamese people. After facing difficulties, they still stand and never surrender.
What is the most common Vietnamese surname? A. Chan, B. Tran, C. Pham, D. Nguyen, E. Le. The answer is D. Nguyen.
In a patriarchal society, Vietnamese women had limited rights and took a secondary place in family. Women were brought up according to a strict discipline and have been traditionally less educated than men. They usually do not enter job market outside the home. Girls from birth were at a disadvantage. Dollar is not considered necessary in heritage. According to Lam, Vietnamese traditional viewpoint was, if you have a son, you can say you have a descendant, but you cannot say so even if you have 10 daughters. After marriage, women became housewife and mother. She was expected to be dependent upon her husband, budgeted his income for the household, took care of children and even grandchildren, performed all household tasks according to mostly, divorce was legal but not common. A wife can be unhappy in her marriage, but rather than accepts divorce, the family encouraged her to sacrifice and to endure the difficulties of the marriage for the sake of her children. Parental role in family was to define the law. Obedience and respect were the traditional virtues which Vietnamese children were taught to exhibit in the family. Discipline and physical punishment were acceptable remedies for disobedience in Vietnamese tradition. Harsh discipline and beating did not constitute abuse of a child, but its reverse, loving care, concern, and attention. When parents grew old, children were expected to take care of them to compensate for the gift of birth and upbringing. The elderly were supported by married or unmarried children until they died. Boys and girls are not free to do what they want. Girls are under strict supervision. Western-style courtship and romance were seen as inappropriate for unmarried children. Virginity is cherished. Pregnancy out of wedlock wedlock is uncommon, and it is a great disgrace to the family.
Which of the following is the most popular Vietnamese dish? A. Spring rolls. B. Fried rice. C. Egg rolls. D. Mooncake. E. Rice noodle soup. And the answer is rice noodle soup.
The major religious traditions in Vietnam are Buddhism, which fuses the forms of Taoism and Confucianism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and the How How sect. Buddhism was first introduced to Vietnam in the 2nd century and reached its peak in the Ly Dynasty or 11th century. It was then regarded as the official religion dominating court affairs. Christianity was introduced to Vietnam in the 16th century by missionaries from Europe's main evangelist countries, France, Spain, and Portugal. The mainstreams are Catholicism and Protestantism. The Islamic followers in Vietnam are primarily from the Cham ethnic minority group living in the central part of the Central Coast. The number of Islamic followers totals about 50,000.
Images of graceful girls in national parade long dresses have been a symbol of Vietnam. However, looking back at the historic development of national dresses, Vietnam not only has outside, but also yet. The indispensable dress of the ancient girls.
What is the capital of Vietnam? A. Saigon. B. Hanoi. C. Hue. D. Ho Chi Minh. E. Dalat. And the answer is D. Hanoi.
The stories of Vietnam's young generation reflect the shifting realities of Vietnam itself, from rural flight and growth of urban centers to entrepreneurial success and the struggle to rebuild a nation, even decades after the end of the American War. Find out what members of this next generation have to say about Vietnam today.
Vietnam is in transition, stitching together two systems, communism and capitalism. Vietnamese-American businessman Henry Nguyen talks about living and working in this historic and economic moment.
We as Americans tend to fear anything labeled communist because it really opposes our ideals about the freedom and individualism. And you can see that we're still a socialist state. And as you can see, there's still banners on the streets and you can hear the announcements over the loudspeakers on the streets. And if you really observe carefully, you can see that the bikes were passed right under the signs, nobody looks up.
Vietnam's economic growth has also produced an educated middle class, with an influx of professionals such as engineer David, who is working on building the Ho Chi Minh Highway. But his job requires long hours far away from home, and he is virtually a stranger to his new wife and child.
I was single when I started working on the Ho Chi Minh Road. My wife and I were just starting to fall in love. And of course, we're still falling in love with each other now. When we were dating, We get in touch by phone and letters. We spend so much time writing letters to each other. And now, I only have this photo taken before we were married. We haven't taken any new photos since our marriage because we spend so little time talking to each other.
Hamdan Lee and his 12-year-old sister Loan took a 12-hour bus ride from their rural village up to Ho Chi Minh City, where they joined thousands of street kids working and living far from home. Each day, they roamed the city streets selling lottery tickets for pennies. Pham Van Vin explains why he came to the city.
My mom is over 55 years old now. She is old and often sick. There is no work for me in the countryside, so I decided to follow my friends to the city.
Economic prosperity has been slow to come to rural areas of Vietnam, where farmers like Lee Dip Wang eke out a living while dodging the thousands of unexploited landmarks still hidden in the country's farmland. Lee reveals the difficulties of farming in a rapidly developing economy. Yun na yun.
My parents are worn invalids. They are old now and no longer have the physical strength to do work, such as farming. So I have to shoulder much of the work. I work to support the family and to afford my brother's schooling and upbringing. Even though we work very hard, we struggle to make ends meet.
Young people such as entrepreneur Aylan Duang, who lived through the aftermath of war, are cautiously optimistic regarding the future. Duang discussed her return to Vietnam after years in Hong Kong detention center and the Vietnamese government attitude towards emerging capitalism.
When I came back from Hong Kong, I saw things had changed. There were more cars, motorbikes, and shops. I tried to study and I tried to work hard. I tried to make the best out of it.
Many years ago, the government called us